This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Is the Club World Cup eyes looking one way emoji quite fun? Botafogo beat PSG, Flamengo beat Chelsea, the Bellinghams enter the chat, Messi scores a free kick, Salomon Rondon's there. Probably worth mentioning the extreme heat, ludicrous individual player walk-ons, Trump quizzing miffed Juventus players amongst others. And looking ahead to the World Cup, who's warming the balls at the draw to keep US and Iran apart, if of course the world is still here. England under-21s beat Spain, plenty of transfer talk, and Sid Lowe has single-handedly got Oviedo promoted to La Liga, so we'll get him on for part 3. As always, we'll answer your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hi, Max.
Hello, Will Unwin.
Hello, Max.
And welcome, Lars Sivertsen.
Hello, Max.
Let's start then with the Club World Cup. Look, we've talked a lot about the issues off the pitch. I've touched a little bit on the actual football. Lars, are you enjoying the football part of it?
I mean, probably more than I thought I would, but my expectations were so low. I mean, they were subterranean. Like, they couldn't have been. It's a bar that it would almost be impossible to get under that bar. I've really felt, and this is hardly an original take, it's the only, everyone who's had to write a take on this the last couple of days have written this, but I feel like the real winners are the South American fans, and to an extent the South American teams as well, but it is those games involving the Brazilian and the Argentinian teams in particular are the ones that have felt like the kind of spectacle that you want this kind of tournament to be, and it is in huge part because of the incredible noise and atmosphere generated by their fans. That's been a huge thing, and it is good that we've seen some results that have not been exactly what we were expecting. Having said that, as I cast a casual glance on the groups, I mean, pretty much all the European teams are on track to qualify. Atletico Madrid are in a bit of bother. Salzburg could be in trouble, actually, even though they are currently second in their group, but they've got Real Madrid in the last one, and if Al Hilal beats Pachuca, Salzburg could probably be out. But it hasn't been this sort of mass failure of the European teams, but there have been more upsets than we probably were expecting, and that has made it more interesting.
Yeah, I wonder, Will, and I hate the phrase when I'm on a Sunday League pitch when the Oppo shout, they don't effing want it. But, like, do you think there is an element of non-Premier League, non-European teams just being more up for this? Hopefully that isn't like a patronising question, but I imagine if you're a South American team, you see a lot of, you're probably in South America, you see more Premier League than we see of South American football.
Yeah, I think, as Lars pointed out, the atmospheres are better with the South American team because there's actual support. I mean, you've seen some of like Chelsea, LA, FC. There's just no atmosphere. There's so many empty stadiums, or like half-empty stadiums. You can actually see it means something to the fans, and if it means something to the fans, you've probably got to give a shit. Whereas, say, City and Chelsea have got a handful of people there, and City have made quite a few signings. They're treating it as pre-season almost, and I think Chelsea are doing the same, moving players around and things like that, and go through the group stages, go through the motions. I mean, City haven't had to try really, whereas obviously for your Flamengos, etc., they're in better condition. They're not tired. They're not. The players are. Let's be honest. A lot of the European players probably don't want to be there. Speak to people. It's just like, I'm not found a single one that suggested their play. If it's an agent or a coach or player themselves that actually wants to really be there and play football because of the heat, because of the end of the season, and that's it. And so I've watched PSG, Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid just looked jet lagged. They were walking around. I mean, City have won games walking around. Bayern have won games walking around in front of very tedious atmospheres. And so, yeah, of course, it doesn't mean that much to them, especially in the group stages where they're all waltzing through it, really. City had no problems against Casablanca. I'm sure we're all up at 2 a.m. this morning with 8 cans and a packet of quavers watching City take on Alain. And it was easy. Alain had 1 shot on target, City had 20-odd shots. And the only interesting thing about that is that City didn't get the 7th, because if they got a 7th, then they only needed a draw against Juventus. That's when they scored the 6th and sprinted back to get to kick off to show how seriously they're taking this tournament. And so, yeah, this tournament is not made for the European teams. The conditions don't suit them. I think they probably suit the South American teams a bit more. And yeah, the fans are taking it a lot more seriously because they can get there easily and are cheaper. And it's a big occasion to see the European teams, or just the European fans don't have that level of interest. And they say that it's quite nice, you're midway through the Brazilian season, I think, 11 games in or whatever into the Brazilian season. So they were all peaking, whereas the European players are wilting and desperately waiting for a couple of weeks in Marbella or Dubai.
Yeah, and you do, Barry. When you see players, when you see substitutes running on the pitch to celebrate, like the Botafogo players or the Flamengo ones, you do sort of get carried along with that, don't you?
Yeah, they're having a good time. Their fans are having a good time. I mean, some of the games, as Will said, have been played at a bit of a walking pace, but players have to slow the game down because on many occasions it's just too hot to go any faster. But if this was a World Cup, I'd be watching every game. We'd be talking about every game. I'm dipping in and out of it. Last week, I was watching cricket. I was watching Royal Ascot. I was watching over the weekend hurling. So I'm dipping in and out of this. I'm quite enjoying it as a tournament. I think it has merit, but there are obvious issues. There's the attendances, and to be fair, I think the attendances have been okay. I think the average attendance is about 35,000, which for two clubs playing far away from home is all right. That's good. But the problem is that these games are being played in giant stadiums that are built for American football games. And, I remember being in Australia years ago in Melbourne. I went to a Big Bash game at the MCG. There was 25,000 people there. That's a decent crowd for a Big Bash game. But because it was at the G, where the attendance is over 100,000 people, it looked like there was nobody there. So I think some of the hand-wringing over attendances has been misguided. And then, there's the problem with the weather and the politics and all that. But I think it's been okay. And I think it will definitely get better once we hit the knockouts.
Yeah, I think so. Look, Chelsea's defeat to Flamengo, Lars, did include Nicolas Jackson's red card. He said, I want to say sorry to the club, the staff, my teammates and all the fans watching. I let you down. Another red card. Honestly, I'm so angry at myself. I work hard every day to help the team, not to put us in this kind of situation. I still don't fully understand how it happened. And actually, that is sort of a worry if he doesn't understand how it happened, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what did he call it? A footballing action that went wrong, or a moment or something?
A football moment that went the wrong way. Yes.
I mean, just in the Premier League, he's got 17 yellow cards in 2 seasons, which for a forward is pretty remarkable. Like, it does seem to happen. It looked like, I think we probably shouldn't be overanalyzing these incidents. It'll be a long pod, but it looked like he was almost trying to do this thing that players do sometimes of kind of stomping your foot on the side of the ball to sort of claim it, to try to, if you put your foot down here, I control the ball. Yeah. But the other player got his leg in so quickly that he ended up stomping him, I guess. But it's happening at a very high speed. So, okay. It's not a good time for Nicolas Jackson to be doing this. I mean, as much as this tournament, I don't think it's life or death for Chelsea, to put it mildly. It's probably life or death for their accountants, possibly. I don't know. They're trying to find out the Todd Bowley finances. But the point is, Chelsea, like a lot of big European teams, I think are in a period where the transfer window is opening. They're kind of using this tournament to sort of assess where are we, what do we have, what do we need. And Nicolas Jackson's place is probably not rock solid, given his iffy goal-scoring record the last 2 seasons. Chelsea have brought in Liam Delap. There's been talk that they're interested in buying in another centre-forward. This is a really bad time for him to be doing this kind of stuff, because you kind of make it easier for people upstairs to make up your mind about him, even if that's a little bit harsh. But I really think that's unfortunate.
Sticking with Chelsea, away from the Club World Cup, Mykhailo Mudryk could face a lengthy ban after being charged by the FA with doping offences. Under FA regulations, he could be banned for as long as 4 years after providing a positive A sample last year. It's believed the performance-enhancing substance meldonium was found in his system. He's not featured for Chelsea since November last year. Mudryk said on Instagram, I can confirm I've been notified the sample I provided the FA contained a banned substance. This has come as a complete shock, as I've never knowingly used any banned substances or broken any rules. I'm working closely with my team to investigate how this could have happened. I mean, it did cost 90 million. A 4-year ban would be a sort of, disaster for him personally, of course, but a problem for Chelsea as well. I mean, unless they sort of sell I don't know, part of Ken Bates back to themselves or something. I don't know. How about Man City? Will beat Al Ain 6-0, as you said. Before that, they beat Wydad 2-0. Yes, for the listener, he is pumping the air, fist pumping the air. Is Will? I mean, lots of new signings playing, and I guess a bit like the bigger side, it's sort of looking like how you're going to set up, isn't it? Really.
Pre-season tournament completely changed the team from first game to second. So the interesting things are those changes, and people like Ait Nouri and City having a proper left back for the first time in quite a few years is interesting. And he was up and down the left, all night at 2 a.m. Bit like myself at that time. And it's interesting to see these changes and having Gvardiol given a chance at centre back, and Cherki has looked lively in the first couple of games. Reinders was really good in the first game. Looks really composed on the ball, which is good. Something maybe City missed, possibly because Rodri wasn't there for all of last season. Rodri's back again. More good pre-season news. Echeverry's looked neat and tidy, although probably with Guardiola repeatedly saying that he needs to cut down the size of the squad, he might be a victim of that to get more game time out and about. Gundogan was really good against Al Ain, 2 goals, really good chip. Did he mean it? Did he not? Into the top corner, because he's been linked with Galatasaray, and I think if we accept that the players that aren't there, i.e. McAtee and Grealish, are going to be sold on, there's still a little bit of leeway of those that are in America, because I think City might do a bit more business, obviously. So he showed that he wanted to stay. He said that after the match, that he wanted to see out his contract. And, Galatasaray probably would be interested in a year's time, maybe, if he wants to fulfill that dream. But yeah, it's interesting to see new players as always come in, and probably quite exciting, as I say, that an actual left-footed left back, someone that's played there all his career, might be willing to do the job for City over the coming seasons. So yeah, Ait Nouri is a positive. I saw a lot. I did 9 Wolves games last year, so I've seen a lot of Ait Nouri. And I mean, going forward, he's incredible defensively. Still a little bit susceptible and does make some interesting decisions when in possession. But I suspect Guardiola might get that out of him. And it would be interesting to see. Sort of touched on it, but City need to beat Juventus in the final game to almost certainly avoid Real Madrid in the next stage, the quarterfinals, is it? So that'll be interesting, because it's 3 p.m. in Orlando, and it'll be about 900 degrees. So both teams will be just walking around. Maybe the Steve Staunton cap might be found for some of the more pale players to wear. And that Haaland with the big white cap on, pouring water on John Aldridge or whatever. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, because if City do get Real Madrid in that game, that might allow everyone to go on holiday.
So before we get on to Real Madrid, Man City have been fined $1 million for consistently late kickoffs. 9 of their games started or restarted late, the longest delay coming before the second half of the Manchester derby last December 2024, which resumed 2 minutes and 24 seconds later than billed. The Premier League said City had accepted and apologised for the breaches, which is what they normally do, with the fines totaling 1.08 million. They have 14 days to pay. There'll be a sad letter on your doormat. You have 14 days to pay £1.1 million. But it seems weird, Barry, doesn't it? Like 2 minutes. What benefit do you get for waiting 2 minutes to make it worth doing in the first place?
Yeah, I don't know of any benefits they got. I mean, if it was a group game in a tournament where there's simultaneous kickoffs, it seems quite punitive punishment for what doesn't seem like a particularly serious offence. But I am a stickler for punctuality. I hate being late for anything, and it really annoys me when anyone else is late for stuff that means I have to hang around waiting for them. So yeah, I might start fining people for being late.
£1 million.
Yeah, if you're 2 minutes late to meet me in the pub, that's you get fine of 500 grand. That goes straight into my pocket.
Do you wonder if the City players are secretly quite happy about this? Because Pep does tend to go on a bit at half time. So, because this is what we learned from that sort of documentary about, which I thought was quite disappointing overall, but like the sort of scenes of Pep just going wild in the dressing room at halftime was quite. He's so intense. Like, it's remarkable to see that, and if you have to do that like every weekend throughout the season, you must get tired of it, surely, on some level. It was like he's on one again about the half spaces and all the things, and surely like. In my mind, if there is like a group WhatsApp chat for the City players that no club officials are in, they're like, heck yes, it's going to have to be a little bit, it's going to have to rein it in next season, isn't it?
I do wonder if maybe with all these documentaries that are going on inside the change rooms, it's sort of like, actually, Pep, can you do that team talk again?
Yeah.
We just didn't get the right angle.
Yeah.
Just
a bit smilier, Pep. Yeah.
We can workshop some ideas. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Bezos will pick up the bill. You go again. Haaland, face the right way.
Phil says, not a question, but an appreciation of Raul Asensio immediately tapping out as soon as he was faced with the GOAT, Salomon Rondon. Jonathan Wilson obviously got in his ear. Yes, Barry, there we had the sight of Asensio getting sent off after about 7 minutes for fouling Salomon Rondon. And of course, all of our eyes opened and went, there's Salomon Rondon. certainly mine did. And he didn't look like he was running that fast. Imagine Asensio could have just run around the other side and got back.
Well, I don't remember Salomon Rondon ever looking like he was running particularly fast. And I haven't seen him play for about 7 years. I didn't realise he was still playing. But there he was with Pachuca getting hauled down by Raul Asensio. So he was obviously too quick for him. He's clearly a very deceptive player in terms of speed. But good to see Salomon still at it, and yeah.
I just imagine Everton fans online protesting the red card, saying this was not a clear and obvious goal-scoring opportunity. It's like, for Big Sally. I do love Big Sally, but arguably not. I do that is a fun thing about this tournament when you get like, is he there? Those are moments I really value those. We should that's fun. I have to admit, I had kind of missed the Sergio Ramos thing. I know not knowing where Sergio Ramos is very much Barry's shtick here. But I had that moment with him when he turned out and was like, I had completely missed that. I think maybe just the Mexican League is a complete like dead zone for me. I don't know.
Sorry, Lars. I'm looking at Barry's face going, do you know where he is?
No.
he scored the other day.
Who's he with?
He's playing for Monterrey, isn't he? David Squires message saying, I've just seen Sergio Ramos score for Monterrey. I felt a sudden surge of empathy for Barry Glendenning. Sorry to interrupt you, Lars. I could just see Barry's face, the panic in his eyes going, what? Who? Where? This can't happen again. I think it's way less egregious than the PSG. It was PSG, wasn't it? The PSG Ramos failure. But I think, listen, as someone, the people who made Football Weekly talking about the narrative arc of Barry Glendenning, really, you're just playing to the crowd now. You know what you're doing. You know exactly what you're doing. Lars, should we talk about the Bellinghams, which could be like a US sitcom from the 80s or a terrible reality show now? But Jude and Joe both scoring. FIFA tweeted, they made history by becoming the first brothers to score at the Club World Cup. So I thought it was I was like, come on, let's slow down, FIFA, you know. But still, it's a nice moment for them.
I think, come on, let's slow down, FIFA, is something we've all felt about the marketing about this tournament. There's really no... Lads, settle down. Settle down now. But do we know, like, I'm the biggest nerd in the room probably, I should be aware of, like, if there's been any brothers in, like, the old Club World Cup who are both scored. I mean, I reckon the Nevilles probably didn't both score in the old Club World Cup. That feels like something that definitely didn't happen.
I'm not doubting the stat. It just seemed like, you know, it's just a silly stat. It's, you know...
It's just the inaugural version of this.
Yeah. It's like the Guardian tweeting out, you know, Max makes history by being the first person to broadcast a pod from a shed in Australia. It's like, well, you know, it's not really a stat, is it?
I think a more interesting stat is the fact that Sheikh Mansour and his brother own Man City and Al Ain.
Is that right? The first brothers.
Sort of technically.
They've made history.
So the first brothers to go head-to-head in the Club World Cup as owners of teams.
Yeah, but both teams didn't score, so it doesn't count.
Like Joe Bellingham to Dortmund, Lars, it's quite a romantic signing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I like it. I like it because it's, this was Dortmund's shtick fairly recently, or has been Dortmund's shtick for a long time, is that they're the sort of this elite finishing school for talent. They're a club where, they are one of the big teams in a way, but they have, and they have, you play in front of an incredible crowd, and there are pressures that come with it. But you are also, from Joe Bellingham's perspective, you are also playing for a club where I think the fans are used to seeing young players come in, and they will not all jump up and down on your head if you have one or two bad games. They'll realize that they have this experience of seeing young players come in and maybe be a little bit inconsistent and kind of find their way, and eventually, it's possible that Bellingham could have gone to an even bigger names somewhere. That's maybe the wrong way of phrasing it, but I think if it had gone to one of the bigger teams in the Premier League, for instance, there would have been more like immediate pressure to like you have to succeed and be brilliant right away. Whereas Dortmund are a great place in terms of getting minutes for a serious big time club, but also in an environment where they understand young players and they have a lot of experience of bringing them through. So I think that's a really canny place for him to go, and it was nice to see him score a goal. Also interesting to see Dortmund just deciding to keep all of their subs in the dressing room in the first half of that game against the Mamelodi Sundowns, just because it was too hot, which is one of those things. It seems absolutely baffling to me that when you're planning this tournament, that no one at FIFA realized that it gets really hot in America during the summer, so you should maybe not have games in the middle of the day if you can avoid it.
They have realized it, Lars. They just don't care.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Like they just don't care at all, and surely. But that seems so self-defeating. Surely for this tournament to work and to capture the attention of the public, the football needs to be not terrible. And if you're forcing people to play in the middle of the blazing hot sun, the football isn't going to be amazing. So it just seems really odd.
And then the City game was played in an air-conditioned stadium last night, which I quite enjoy the difference in stadia. Whereas the Rose Bowl at Pasadena, there's no covering or anything. Watching that PSG Atletico Madrid, so I was just sort of worried about sunburn on the fans and the players. You look at one stadium and it's really nice and air conditioned. The other one is just a hazard for people in the sun, and that's the nature of it. I mean, it's so strange that there's no sort of joined up thinking about any of it.
Just worth pointing out that Antonio Rudiger says he was racially abused at the end of his side's win against Pachuca. So we'll follow that and find out the findings of that in the next week. Adam Crafton reporting in The Athletic that FIFA decided not to show videos or signage which explicitly mentioned challenging racism or discrimination at the venues. FIFA point to statutes politically neutral when asked if the US political climate played a part in that decision. Following pushback, they then did put those messages back in the stadia.
No, they only put them back for one day only. So it was a bit of a sop, but now they're no longer there.
Meanwhile, the Juventus squad all stood behind Donald Trump, who went on to ask them about Iran and transgender footballers. Completely ridiculous situation. Timothy Weah said after their game, it was a surprise. They were told they had to go.
In case people haven't seen the video, it's extraordinary because when Trump, it's always fascinating watching Trump live because he just speaks like a particularly dense child. He just kind of rambles on. It's completely incoherent and weird, and it remains very odd that anyone ever voted for him to have held any kind of higher office, but here we are. But when he starts going on about, trying to almost bait the Juventus players into saying something about transgender stuff, there's one man who keeps his cool, and it's one of the Juventus directors who immediately goes in and says, because Trump asked them if a woman could play for your team, and there's a Juventus director who keeps his head cool and says, we have a really good women's team, to try to diffuse the situation. That director was Damien Comoli, which is incredibly strange. The former Tottenham and Liverpool sporting director and the early analytics guru, Damien Comoli, who has very unexpectedly been hired as a general manager at Juventus after a few years in the wilderness. So, and it just made me think, this is a very serious subject, and I'm being slightly flippant, but what is happening in the world when we have Damien Comoli in the White House avoiding a diplomatic incident by trying to guide a man-child president back onto a more rational subject? And it just kind of makes me go, what is going on? I know that's something we're saying a lot about non-footballing things at the moment as well, but it's a deeply weird situation.
Paul says, is there a genuine fear, and no one can answer this question, about the USA getting drawn with Iran at the 2026 World Cup? How will it work with the current travel bans? Will Trump just say Iran can only play games in Mexico or Canada? Yeah, obviously. The time of recording is the day after the US dropped those bombs on the nuclear sites in Iran. So, I mean, who knows is the question. But
I mean, I think this is very simple. If there's a complete travel ban for citizens of a country that's competing in the World Cup, then you can't hold the World Cup. FIFA should just make this very clear. If you've banned all people from a participant country to enter, then you can't host the tournament. This is not complicated. This should be the bare minimum of a host country.
Yeah, but FIFA won't do that.
No, of course they won't. But, just saying.
Just before we go, because I mentioned it in the intro, Baz, the individual walk-ons, which are ludicrous, and they go on forever. And it's... Wilson wrote a good piece about it, didn't he? And it is just... It just feels so anathema to what football should be.
Yeah, well... you want to see the two teams walk out side by side. It's all part of the ceremony, gladiatorial, as Wilson described it. And quite apart from the practicalities of it, it takes ages. So the first player who's introduced has to stand around in very hot weather, waiting up to 7, 8, 9 minutes for each of the 22 players to be individually introduced. So it doesn't work on an aesthetic level. It doesn't work on a practical level. It needs to be binned. I suspect even Gianni Infantino will say this isn't working. But I was thinking, like, if Joe Hart was playing, he's always a guy I associate with, the ref gives the signal and then Joe Hart claps his hands above his head and says, "Come on, lads!" and then looks behind him and there's no one there. But yeah, it really, really doesn't work. And it's one of many things in this tournament, which, to be fair, is not really aimed at moany middle-aged men like us who like to yell at clouds. But I think even the kids that FIFA, the new wave of or generation of fans FIFA are trying to attract, will not appreciate this at all.
Imagine the moment in the game between Ulsan HD of Korea versus the Mameloni Sundowns, which was played in front of 3,000 people. The guy is introducing like the left back for Ulsan, who's a Swedish guy. Is like, it's number 17, Gustav Ludvigsson. You think just 3,000 really confused people in the stadium? Okay, I guess, sure. It's so dumb. Who is this for?
Anyway, look, that'll do for part one. Part two, we'll begin with England under 21. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So England beat Spain, perhaps slightly surprisingly, in the quarterfinal of the under-21s, 3-1. They'd had a pretty shaky group stage. Will, you're on the minute by minute of this victory. Who impressed you?
Everyone playing for England did a strange turn of events, having also watched the England-Germany game a few days beforehand, where it was very pedestrian, very blunt. Whereas it was a completely different team, seemed to turn up against Spain. Really helped by the fact they played a number 9, which did not previously in the tournament. So they had Jay Stansfield down the middle, who was really good, badgering, but I think those players behind him, Elliott, McAtee, Amari Hutchison, were excellent. Hutchison down the left was causing problems from very early on. The England centre-backs, Kwanzaa, came out at the back, wandering up to the edge of the box and firing a shot away for England to get the second, with Harvey Elliott knocking in the rebound. But yeah, it was a really good disciplined performance. Kept the ball well against Spain when they needed to, and when it was 2-1 for a lot of the second half after Spain scored a penalty, it was the sort of hardcore English defending of the good old days, chucking yourself in front of shots, etc. Really hard work. Again, not quite warm there. Long seasons for young players, so Lee Carsley trying really hard not to overload them. I mean, the interesting point was in the second minute, Spain were awarded a penalty for a handball where it hit Cresswell on the arm, and his arm was just out to the side, and the referee awarded it, and it wasn't next to his body, and then he was told to review it, and I was shocked when he overturned the decision. So yeah, which really helped England out. The pundits and I think Joe Hart, maybe a bit too patriotic, was saying how that was a common sense decision, but I was very surprised it was overturned because his arm wasn't right next to his body. But yeah, England just looked really good. I say, I think having a number 9 changed things because previously Jonathan Rose played there as a bit of a false 9. They've had other people in that position. It's just not worked. And so they're missing Liam Delap, who's with Chelsea. But yeah, a really good performance to give them confidence after, say, very slow performances against Slovenia and against Germany in the last couple of games. And then that was against Germany's second string. They completely changed their 11 because they were already through. And then they did get a goal in the end, but they looked very, very, very poor at times in that match, despite having a lot of possession, but never really like scoring. So yeah, positive for England. And Spain weren't really on it. They're missing some players, but they were really outdone physically and even technically by England. So yeah, really, really positive move.
England will play the Netherlands in the semi-finals. They beat Portugal. The other quarterfinals were great. France scored twice in 2 minutes late on. I think 84th and 85th minute to beat Denmark. New Spurs permanent signing, Matthias Tell, with a really good winner, actually. And then Germany beat Italy 3-2. Italy took the lead in the second half. Germany equalised. Willy Gnonto was sent off for Italy. Germany took the lead in the 87th minute. Italy had another player sent off, so they're down to 9 men, but they still equalised in the 96th minute. And then Germany scored the winner in extra time in the 117th minute. Although good luck trying to find highlights. It's been a long time. Just going on YouTube and it's those sort of AI. You try and get a 3-minute highlights of something and you just get someone in AI and just some pictures of another football match. And you're like, please, why are you? Who is making these and what's happening? And can they stop being on my laptop, please? Hey, in England adjacent news, Barry, Gareth Southgate has apparently applied to be the head coach of Poland. They're in a World Cup qualifying group with Finland, Netherlands, Lithuania and Malta. They currently sit third on 6 points, level with the Netherlands. Finland have 7 points. They've all played different numbers of games. What do you think?
I was a bit surprised when I heard about this. Obviously, Poland's previous manager quit because he did he strip Robert Lewandowski the captaincy or something? And Lewandowski spat the dummy, said he wouldn't play for this guy anymore. So your man went, well, I better resign then. So that's how the vacancy arose. I would say, when it comes to World Cups and Euros, Poland are invariably there, but you always expect very little of them. That won't change if Gareth Southgate is in charge.
I looked it up. Hamulek Rexny is handbrake in Polish. So, they big cries for release the Hamulek Rexny.
I mean, I really, for the sake of this Southgate banter to continue, I really hope England win the next tournament because I think people are going to look quite stupid and maybe realize that actually getting to finals all the time is really hard.
No, I totally agree with you. I think you're right. I think he did an excellent job as England manager. But we don't need to have that row now. We can have it again sometime. Premier League fixtures are out. Thank goodness. Football is back. The season starts with Liverpool-Bournemouth on Friday the 15th of August. Manchester United-Arsenal on the opening weekend too. Actually, Arsenal's probably the big story. They've got quite a tricky opening. Man United away, Leeds at home, Liverpool away, Forest home, Man City home, Newcastle away. Obviously, it appears like every team is playing each other home and away, but that's a tricky start, Will, for Arsenal, isn't it?
Yeah, well, United away. Is that a tricky start? Is it?
Well, no, but having Liverpool City and Newcastle away in the first 6 is hard. I agree with you. They should,
Oh, yeah, of course it is. And especially because a team that they're really trying to manoeuvre in the market, linked with Martinelli going and trying to bring people in because they have the finest margin of wanting to go from second to first, which is really, really hard. So the more difficult your starting point when you're making those key changes, it will have an impact. I mean, the other team who've got a really hard start is Burnley, who have come up and, going to have to redefine parking the bus in the opening 6 games, I think, was the Football Daily one day this week when the fixture released, because they've got a lot of big games, plus Sunderland at home. So, yeah, I mean, the harder you start, the harder it is to get momentum if you don't win those, if you draw in even a few of those difficult home and away games. Because that's what football's all about. It's about momentum. And, when City lost it this season, they were looking to challenge for the title and you lose games 6 in a row and whatnot, you lose it. So if you can't get it going at the start of the season, then you're napped.
Yeah, Burnley have Tottenham away. I can see Spurs buggering that up. Tottenham away, Sunderland at home, Man United away, but then they play Liverpool at home, Forest at home, and Man City away. So yeah, that is tricky, isn't it? West Ham at home for Sunderland, Barry. You happy with that as an opening fixture?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, West Ham, Burnley, Brentford are Sunderland's first 3 fixtures. A Sunderland supporting friend of mine, he views that as 9 points in the bag, and I wish I had a far less cynical view of football. I applaud his optimism. I don't share it.
What a column that's going to be.
I'm more inclined to view it as no points in the bag and Regis out. Panic sacking of the manager. But anyway, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I just find out, I don't know if there are any transfer rumours that are piquing any of your interests, Lars? Anything? No? Oh, that's good. No, nothing.
Listen, all of my spare enthusiasm is currently going into the Club
Good
World
for
Cup.
you. I like the fact that you have it, that you open a cupboard for spare enthusiasm. You're quite an enthusiastic man.
Yeah, but there's really very little left after expending the points that were needed to care about the Club World Cup. We are absolutely down to the bare bones.
When
there.
Lars Sivertsen is running dry of enthusiasm, there's no point looking at Barry and Will, if I'm being brutally honest.
Well, I have to say, I have normally no interest in transfer speculation, but I am taking an interest in speculation related to Sunderland, and I have to say very little of it is piquing my interest. And my enthusiasm reserves are dwindling by the day, with the greatest of respect to Cameron Carter-Vickers and Japhet Tanganga.
I think Tanganga would be a good signing for them.
I would point out, worth having a look at the Cambridge United announced, video for the new shirt with the new crest, with so many Cambridge United legends, and also me in it. Beginning it's very exciting, real honour to be part of that. Went to be next to Dion, Paul Wanless, Andy Duncan, Harrison Dunk. Well, these names, everyone will know who they are.
Was the bloke from Groove Armada not available? Are they doing the festivals?
Yeah, they couldn't get him or Saggers, so they got me. So yeah, very exciting.
What about Ryan Loft? Is he still involved?
We gave Ryan Loft a 3-year deal. We're pinning a lot of hopes on Lofty for next season. But he didn't make the video. James Brophy is the only current player I think who made the video. But yeah. It's actually pretty good, and it did give me some enthusiasm for the season. And then we signed somebody. Obviously, we signed someone who'd played for Swansea's under-21 team in goal. So I messaged Ellis James, going, "Have you heard of this guy?" And he went, "Nope." I was like, "Okay, thanks." He said, "I probably know someone who does." I went, "You don't have to try too hard on this, Ellis." Anyway, that'll do for part 2. Sid Lowe will join us for part 3, and we will congratulate him for getting Oviedo promoted. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly, and Sid Lowe joins us. Hey, Sid.
Hello, Max.
Oviedo promoted. You did it single-handedly. Before we start, there may be some new listeners who don't know what your connection to Oviedo is and how long it's lasted, and sort of how close you are to that club.
Well, my connection doesn't really matter very much, but I did my year abroad there as a student. I'm reluctant to say this, if only because it shows how old I am. In 96, 97, and did a year abroad in Oviedo. Decided, obviously, that I would go and watch the local football team play. They were in the first division at the time, and have been an Oviedo fan ever since. And Oviedo were relegated in 2001 out of the first division, haven't been back. But in that time, they've been all the way down to Tercera, which, although it's called third, is actually the fourth tier of Spanish football. And it's worse than the fourth tier of Spanish football because there are 17 divisions, 350 teams. Even the Segunda B, Second Division B, which is the one above it, was 4 divisions and 80 teams regionalised. So those two are always considered to be not professional football. And those are the two before you get into Second Division. So Oviedo have been, since 2001 when they were relegated in Mallorca. I was actually in the stadium that day. We all didn't think it was going to take this long. 24 years away. A lot of that not even in the Second Division. In fact, didn't get back up into the Second Division until 2015. And that was a huge, big deal. And now back in the First Division. The really big thing for Oviedo is that twice they've been on the verge of going out of business. So this isn't just about kind of being back in the First Division. It's more that what being back in the First Division symbolises. And that kind of sense of a reaffirmation, if you like, of existence, I guess. I mean, that sounds very, very high blown, but I think that's basically what this is.
Yeah, and so talk us through, this win, a 2-leg promotion playoff against Mirandes, who I confess I don't know a huge amount about.
Mirandes, yeah, who were
Mirandes.
in with a chance of being in the first division for the first time in their entire history. Had they gone up, I mean, obviously, look, I'm entirely biased on this for obvious reasons, but had they gone up, it would have been absolutely brilliant. And, I'm glad it's not them, because I'm glad it's Oviedo, and Oviedo going up is brilliant. I think even for people who aren't Oviedo fans, by the way, I don't think I should just come on here and tell you all that it's wonderful because I like Oviedo. I think a lot of people are really, really happy it's Oviedo. Mirandes going up would have been amazing. Of course, the story that around which this all kind of hooks for everybody is Santi Cazorla. And so just to give you the basics of the playoff, 2-legged playoff, home and away, Oviedo beat Almeria in the first playoff. Santi Cazorla scored the goal in the second leg that took Oviedo into the playoff final. The playoff final isn't played at a neutral ground, it's played home and away. Oviedo were defeated 1-0 at Mirandes, in Miranda de Ebro. Santi Cazorla had a knock on his knee and was actually watching in a press cabin. He may or may not have been standing next to an Englishman who was probably getting on his nerves quite a lot during that game, watching that game, getting very frustrated. And then was back for this one. Oviedo go 1-0 down quite early, so 2-0 down over on aggregate. Here's the weird one for you. In the playoffs, the team that finishes higher in the league, if it's a draw, goes up. So Oviedo only needed to draw, but there is extra time. So the other team gets extra time for the chance to win. So Oviedo, Santi scores, it's 1-1. They score to make it 2-1. They're going up, but they've got to go for extra time to keep going up, and then they score a third in extra time to go up 3-1. It was was brilliant, honestly. Wow.
Yeah, okay. Talk us through when they score the third in extra time, so it's done, right? Because it's like away goals, Mirandes need 2.
There's a kind of a thing that, obviously it's euphoria, but I think it's more than euphoria. It's a kind of think of, there's almost a decompression. So, wow, it's actually going to happen. And Oviedo, because they've been through what they've been through, because they twice almost went out of business, a real sense. I think every team has this. But I think maybe in Oviedo's case, it feels a bit more justified because in those years of being relegated, by the way, I should point this out, in 2003, Oviedo got relegated 2 divisions at once. One on the pitch and one off the pitch because of their financial crisis. So they went down to the second division. But right, no, you're going down another division. Because they had players denouncing the fact that they hadn't been paid, because the club essentially went into administration. The owner they had after that was being looked for by Interpol because he on a couple of counts of fraud, he disappeared. The suggestion was that he was somewhere in Central America trying to escape justice. The way that the club survived in 2012, which was a way of not only finding the money to help the club survive in the short term, but also diluting his shares enough to be able to take control back, was to do in his absence a share issue. And effectively dilute his shares and rescue the club. So anyway, what happens, I think, on Saturday is this sense of, even when you're 3-1 up, something bad can always happen. Something bad can always go wrong. And so at the end, it's a kind of a relief. It's a let go. There's a sense of nostalgia. There's a lot of people. I know this is a little bit, how do I put this? This is maybe a little bit kind of morose or a little bit deliberately sort of, I don't know, kind of looking for the sort of the hyper emotional and overplaying it. But I spoke to so many people at the weekend who talked about the people who didn't make it. Because in 24 years, a lot of people pass away. A lot of people who they thought would be with them at this point pass away. And in Oviedo's case, I think that's particularly poignant because you've had 3 players at playing age pass away in this period as well. And so there's that sense of, players didn't make it with them. A sporting director who passed away in this period as well. Of the board of directors when Oviedo came through the crisis in 2012, one of those passed away. It's been, wow. And then the release was just amazing. You know what? I was, should I say this? Yeah, go on then. I was crying before Santi even took the penalty.
Sid, I know you always downplay your role in helping to pull Oviedo back from the brink. In 2012, when I think they needed to raise €2 million, and
in the short term, yeah.
You were doing a lot of mobilisation of fans. I think a lot of our listeners bought shares and have their own, so they have an interest in Oviedo now. I don't know, will they all be millionaires now? But can you just remind us what it was you did to help?
With a sense of dread, I suppose I probably can because.
Sorry, but yeah. I just find it interesting.
I mean, I do actually. In a way, you've made it one part of this really nice, which is that now's a very good chance to say thank you to all the people who did buy shares, to all the people who did kind of respond in 2012. So to try and explain what happened in 2012 is, as I say, there's the situation at the club. A kind of a board takes over the club, the management of the club, and a board of fans and board of people who for me will always be just total heroes. And they were in a position where they had to try and manage this financial crisis, this institutional crisis. As I say, the majority shareholder has disappeared. He's been looked for by the police, and they're running the club. And there's only really one way out, and that's, well, we'll try and do a share issue. We'll bring people in because they desperately needed, basically, as you said, 2 million euros. It's just short of 2 million. I think it's 1.9 million euros immediately to survive. Just short of 4 million euros to kind of get to the end of the season and have a degree of medium-term stability. And there's almost no way of doing this. And they come up with this idea of, well, we'll do a share issue. And the part that I played in this was essentially to kind of internationalise the share issue, and essentially to say, quite desperately, please buy shares. Now, I think Oviedo were really fortunate at that point, and this is where the horrendous journalistic bias comes in. I genuinely think in the Premier League at the time, of the best 10 players, maybe even of the best 7 or 8 players, 3 were youth team products of Real Oviedo. Juan Mata, Santi Cazorla and Michu at the time. Bear in mind, this is Michu's big explosive season where he's absolutely brilliant. And I think that gave us this incredible hook with which to say to people, listen, this is the club, to Chelsea fans, this is the club that gave you Juan Mata. This is the club that gave Arsenal Santi Cazorla. This is the club that gave Michu to Swansea. This is a club that had those players, and because of those crises, lost those players. Michu did play in the first team at Oviedo. He was part of the team actually that won promotion from Tercera to Segunda B. Mata and Cazorla never made it to the first team because essentially they were forced to go before they got that chance. And so you had this, I think, this brilliant hook to be able to say to people, or this brilliant kind of emotional tug, if you like, to say to people, listen, you can't allow this club that made this contribution to these Premier League teams to go out of business. Please buy shares. And I think a couple of things also happened that really helped. I think it was tangible. The shares were €10.85, I think, if I remember rightly, at the time. As you've mentioned, it was 2 million euros they had to reach a target of. They were talking 50, 60 million euros. We're talking a target that's really, really reachable. And you can genuinely make an impact by buying shares. And people responded, and it was incredible. And people responded. In the end, Oviedo had just short of 37,000 shareholders around the world in 85 different countries, loads of English fans. And I really, really loved, I saw a couple of them at the weekend, actually, Ben and Malk, who are Peterborough fans, Ipswich fans, respectively, who are in Oviedo. And so, but, you know, look, most people in truth bought shares and helped out and bought a share and said, there you go, there's my contribution. Some of them, you know what, I'm going to become an Oviedo fan as well. I'm going to follow this team through. And so there's a, you know, as I say, there's a massive gratitude that I feel to these people who kind of helped in that moment, who didn't know anything about Oviedo really, except that they had these 3 players, except that we were basically saying, please help us out. And it would have been really easy to say, why would I? But people did. Thousands and thousands of people did. It was completely overwhelming, completely brilliant. And that's kind of where Oviedo got to this point. Your question of what the shares are worth, I remember at the time saying to people, listen, think of this as a charitable donation. Your shares are not worth anything. I guess if you could find someone who wanted to buy them now, you could try. But I honestly don't know what the mechanics of doing it would be. But it's fair to say that an Oviedo share is worth a lot more than €10.85 now, if it can be sold. But I honestly don't know if it can be sold.
I suspect it probably can't. But...
Probably can't, yeah. Oviedo, by the way, are in their centenary year this year. So going up is even bigger, this idea of them being in a centenary. And I've been talking to people at the club a lot about trying to find some way of, I mean, obviously you can't take 37,000 people from around the world to a stadium that only holds 30,000, but some way of kind of, I don't know, expressing that gratitude and somehow bringing them to the club. I'd say one of the loveliest things for me over these last 10 years or so has been how many of them are going to games as well and really taking this on as their club.
Oh, well, credit to you for your involvement in that, especially, you know, considering this pod only started in 2017 as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
You know, to for all those listeners in 2012 to put that out is incredibly impressive. And look, do you have the clout, Sid? Is this going to be like every week? You know, your report will be it's El Clasico, but you're at Celta Vigo, Real Oviedo.
Do you know what? I mean, a lot of people have said this to me, and What am I going to do now? Because my professional career, as I say, Oviedo were a first division team when I lived in Oviedo in 96, 97. I saw them go down in 2001 in Mallorca, and that was my first season doing the Spanish football column for The Guardian. And that was a season that I was living part in Spain, part in England, going back and forth. I've been living kind of permanently in Spain since 2001 in Madrid, now just outside Madrid. We're going back and forth to Oviedo. And I've never had this professional conflict. Because in a way, it's like, my professional is the first division. Obviously, there have been Oviedo articles over the years, and probably a bit more than there should be. But Oviedo are kind of compartmentalised. And now they're right there. And I'm, horrendous bias. I wrote about Santi yesterday and about them coming up, and because I just kind of thought, I can't not do this. But then I sort of didn't want to. I don't know what I'm going to do, Max. Yeah, the weekend of the Clásico does not exist. Oviedo are away at Getafe, and that is the game of the weekend.
Can I ask you, Sid, we've done lots in the Club World Cup in part one, and we've done Real Madrid and whatever, but how seriously are people in Spain taking the tournament? Yeah,
I mean, look, I was trying to work this out yesterday, and I know it's a silly thing to say, but bear with me. This is front and centre of the media coverage. It's front and centre of the footballing conversation. But I think I was trying to work out if it really is, and if it's because of the Club World Cup. So let me explain what I mean by that. I'm not 100% sure that we're really seeing very much more coverage of these Real Madrid games than we would if Real Madrid were playing in pre-season with a new manager and a load of new signings.
Sure.
Focal point for me is still about what are they building? What is this building to? What is happening? What's Xabi Alonso doing? How are these players going to fit in? I'm not sure it's yet about, are they going to win this big competition? And Florentino Perez actually spoke on TV, which he normally doesn't do. It was slightly strange and slightly confused conversation. But anyway, he was talking about what a big deal this was and how this is what they've been fighting for and so on. I mean, he was talking about it as if it was the Superliga, when of course it's not. And so there was a sense of its importance there. And as I say, there's a sense of its importance in terms of people covering. But I think the covering of it is much more about how they play and who they've got and what they're building than are they going to win this amazing competition. In fairness, once we get into knockout rounds, maybe that will happen. And so it matters, but I think it matters because Real Madrid are there. I wonder if in England, for example, it might have been different had Liverpool, United or Arsenal been there.
Yeah, possible.
No offence to Chelsea and City, by the way, but what I mean is that kind of sense of the momentum of it all.
Yeah, I just quickly, there's a rumour of Rashford to Barcelona. He said he'd like to play with Lamine Yamal, and who wouldn't?
I'd quite like that Porsche I saw in the forecourt the other day.
Yeah.
He's a player that they're interested in. I wonder where it leaves him, the fact that Barcelona are now admitting very publicly, no problems with it, that they are going for Nico Williams. They've agreed a deal with Nico Williams. They now have to find a way to pay his buyout clause from an athletic club and to be able to, of course, to then register him with the financial fair play rules. And had that Nico thing not looked so close to happening now, I'd have said to you, Rashford makes complete sense because he has all the things that you want in that he's a forward who can play wide or through the middle, who can give you a bit of variety in the forward line, and you don't have, if you like, some of those financial problems, although I imagine that his wage is still pretty high. So I imagine you still have that issue. But maybe not so much as with a player like Nico, where you're spending 60 million on the transfer fee. And if you're paying it as a buyout clause, by the way, you're paying it all up front in one go. There's no deal there. There's no putting it off. There's no paying it in instalments unless you can get a deal with his club. So I think they will continue to be interested in Rashford. But I think the urgency of it has been taken away a little bit if they can get this deal for Nico. Well, not the deal for Nico over the line, if they can get the paperwork and the registration for Nico over the line.
That'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Sid.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Lars.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Max.
Cheers, Baz. Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Danielle Stevens, and we'll be back next Monday.
This is The Guardian.